You everybody for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. We are now literally, like not figurative, literally a couple hours away from week 0. College football is here. Yet, unfortunately, the never-ending story of the summer appears to keep on going as we got a new twist on realignment over the last couple hours. Okay, so here's the deal. I think everybody kind of knows the deal by now. Pac-12 on its deathbed, not doing well. Over the last couple weeks, Oregon and Washington go to the Big Ten. They are, of course, joining USC and UCLA. And then, obviously, Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah go to the Big 12, leaving 4 schools behind. The last time we talked realignment, there was an interesting little update that maybe, just maybe, Cal and Stanford could end up in, of all places, the ACC. The Atlantic Coast Conference had an interest in 2 schools in the Bay Area, thousands of miles away. But unfortunately, like we've all been through in our single dating lives, Cal and Stanford flirted pretty hard with the ACC. There was no flirtation back, and we thought it was done, and it was done, at least until Wednesday night when Ross Dellinger, who has done an incredible job on all this stuff from Yahoo Sports, put out a new report with a new twist. And it's this. It is that the ACC could very much add 3 new schools in the coming days. Cal, Stanford, and how about this? SMU. So just a few days ago, Cal and Stanford was dead. It wasn't going to happen. Nobody was interested, blah, 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 blah. Now they could be going along with SMU. And at first glance, I know what all of you are thinking. Torres, you're crazy. First of all, I'm not crazy. I'm just sharing my thoughts on a report that came out from a very good reporter that was later confirmed by ESPN, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's crazy, but if you want to know why it could happen and why at this point it actually might happen, all you got to do, biggest cliche, most simple cliche in life, all you got to do is follow the money. First off, speaking of money, Cal, Stanford, and certainly SMU are basically willing to take none just to have a place to house their sports teams. The report from Dellinger says that Cal and Stanford would come in at about a 30% clip in terms of total revenue that they would accept from the ACC. So most ACC schools are going to make upwards of $30 million. I believe the baseline is like $24 million. And Cal and Stanford would essentially be willing to come in at $10 million. They would slowly build up, eventually get to a full share by the end of that TV contract in 2036. And then there's SMU, which just flat out says, we will come to the ACC for free. You don't owe us any money at all from the media rights. Just let us in the league. We won't take any money, which is insane to me. But apparently SMU has that much money where it's not an issue. I think it's crazy. I don't run the athletic department, so it isn't my decision. So that's one. Why it could happen. It's because the schools are basically willing to come for free. Here's the interesting part, though, that Ross Dellinger shared that I don't know that I saw prior to Wednesday. It's that, how about this? In the ACC's TV contract with ESPN, if the ACC expands, ESPN will pay $24 million a year per school. So that means if those 3 schools join, that's upwards of $72 million that would go back into the ACC. Now, if all those schools wanted a full share, it doesn't really make sense, right? And I think that's why this hasn't really become a topic of conversation. It's because for the most part, you just assume if you're going to add a school, they're coming for the money. They want the money. So if all those schools want 24 million, then obviously, look, the ACC is like, we're good, whatever, no big deal. But those schools don't want that. And so if even Cal and Stanford take 10 million, you can add 3 schools and get, how about this, $72 million to split among the rest of the conference. That is especially important at this moment in time where everybody, most notably the power school, like the powerful football schools, the schools that really are college football powers, are unhappy with the current layout of their contract and feel like they should get more. What have we talked about multiple times since like February? It's that Florida State is complaining publicly, we need to be making more money. We're going to be making $30 million. Our SEC, our rivals that are in the SEC are going to be making $60 or $70 million. We're going to be down $30 million a year every year for the next 13 years. That's not going to work for us. And so if the ACC were allowed to expand, or if they vote to expand, then that means an extra 50 plus million in the coffers. And as Dellinger explains it, basically that money would go to it would be incentive based on football success. So it's not like you're splitting 50 million evenly and Boston College is getting the same amount as Florida State. If Florida State wins the ACC, if Florida State goes to the college football playoff, if Florida State does whatever, wins 10 games, 12 games, whatever, they would get a bigger percentage or all of that percentage. So this checks a lot of boxes. It allows the ACC to get money out of nowhere. By the way, whoever put that into the contract at ESPN, they're probably getting talking to if they're not getting fired, because I can't imagine ESPN is happy to pay $24 million a year for SMU, Cal, and Stanford. And so I bring it up because this is going to be fascinating to watch going forward. Now, there is expected to be a vote early next week, and the question becomes, how does that vote go? Because a few weeks ago when this first was brought up, you needed, I think 13 of or 12 of 15 schools to vote positive, to vote in favor of expansion, and only 11 did. The 4 schools that held out: Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and NC State. And on the surface, that makes a lot of sense, because the more schools you bring into the conference, the harder it will be for those schools to get out. The most vocal school about getting out is Florida State. But Clemson knows if they get out, they're going to have plenty of options, and it's the same with North Carolina. And so it's an interesting time because we will see what happens. I don't have a good answer as to what will happen, but the question ultimately comes down to, does one of those schools flip its vote so that this conference expands? Now, I think the expansion is terrible. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't help the sports products at all. Forgive me, but my grandpa didn't bounce me on his lap telling me about Stanford versus North Carolina and Cal versus Duke in the ACC basketball tournament. That will be weird. The Cal Boston College opener of the ACC tournament on Tuesday in Barclays Center is going to be bizarre. But we know it's not about basketball. We know it's not about Olympic sports. We know conference realignment at this point doesn't even make sense. It's about survival. It's obviously what Cal and Stanford want. They're willing to make sacrifices. Now we'll see if they can get the necessary votes. Again, you can't have 4 no's. They need to flip one of those to a yes. My guess is Florida State saying no, Clemson saying no, UNC's probably saying no. Can you convince NC State? By the way, NC State, I don't know what you're doing, because if the big ACC breaks up, I think you're going to be in big trouble. But that's neither here nor there. This will be interesting to follow. Just when you thought realignment was dead, very much back alive.